women who opened up the service with Pandango sa Ilaw. Thank you for the music. Thank you for... I think that's what I miss about being in a Filipino Methodist church, the music, and our love for singing. Thank you so much. So I would like to thank Lydia Sakun, who invited me a month ago to share this morning with you. I know she's not here, she's in Pampanga. But when she called me, I was actually at a baseball camp where we were the weekend chaperones for my grandson who was playing baseball. And we watched him play 4 games during that weekend. But isn't that what Lolas do? Yeah. We drop everything when we are called to our apostolic ministry. And that is also exactly what my mother used to do when we were growing up. Children always came first. My mother was a one-woman social welfare agency. She often brought in kids from the street. She would bathe them and feed them and then send them home. You know these mothers, right? Yes. Yeah. And all of us have memories of our mothers doing ordinary acts as if they are extraordinary. That is why I want to focus my talk on the holiness of mothers. In Hawaii several years ago, I was invited to a conference, and someone took me to a sacred site which is not open to tourists. It's called the Birthing Stones. It's called Pukaniloko. And this is where the Hawaiian royal babies were born in ancient times. The place is believed to be filled with mana, and it is here that the gods would recognize the child's royal birth. So when my Filipino friend brought me to that site a few years ago, before we entered, he offered a chant, asking permission for entry, and then he asked us to remove our shoes, for we were on holy ground. And as I walked bare feet around this sacred site, with tears in my eyes, the thought that kept coming to me was, thank you for the holiness of mothers. My tears were my prayer at that moment in that sacred ground. And I've always, since then, always reflected on the holiness of mothers. I've also been thinking about my mother, who was Catholic before she converted and became a Methodist when she married my dad. I have often wondered how that conversion affected her devotion to Mother Mary and how she may have had to hide it. I feel in my heart today that it may have been Mother Mary who sustained her faith and gave her strength and courage to raise 6 children. And I offer my talk this morning to honor my mother. And this morning, it also feels right for me to talk about the holiness of the mother of Jesus, of Mary. In preparing this talk, I was looking for information as to why Protestants do not talk about Mary. And I found a lot of information online, but I am not able to share all of those details with you, but just a few points, okay? So around 1054, the Eastern Orthodox Church calls Mary Theotokos, the Mother of God. According to the Eastern Orthodox Church, Mary was chosen by God, and Mary freely cooperated in that choice. Therefore, she is honored above all saints. And then around 1500, Martin Luther, our Protestant reformer, wrote, Mary is the embodiment of God's grace, as he was writing a commentary on the Magnificat, which is the scriptures that were read today. But then around 16th century, Marian devotion lost favor with the Protestants in the 16th century. In the meantime, though, Catholicism spread during the colonial era. Churches were built on top of sacred sites that were dedicated to the goddess. In ancient cultures, there are myths that refer to the virgin birth of the gods. Well, today Protestants are beginning to take another look at Mary as a bridge to ecumenism. Cynthia Rigby, a Presbyterian theologian, writes that Mary is the archetypal Christian, the mother of all believers. Kathleen Norris says that she didn't learn much about Mary from her Methodist and congregational upbringing, but after spending time in a Benedictine monastery, she grew to identify with Mary. She said, like Mary, I am invited each day to bring Christ into the world in my prayers, thoughts, and actions. In another book, Mary, a flesh and blood biography of the Virgin Mother, Middle East historian Leslie Hazelton speculates that Mary may have been a shepherd, herding sheep and goats on craggy hillsides and learning about healing and herbal cures from the village women, lessons which she may have passed on to her son. Mary is also the bridge across different cultures. Mary appears prominently in the Quran. She is compared to Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, the founder of the Islamic faith. In Mexico, Mary appeared to an oppressed Aztec Indian in the 16th century, and she is now worshipped or venerated as the Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe, or the Black Madonna. In the Philippines, devotion to the Virgin Mary is the mother of all devotions. So clearly there's a powerful resonance to the story of Mary, the mother of Jesus, that is beyond theological and doctrinal debates in the history of the Christian church. But personally, I am most attracted to the story that Mary may have been a shepherd, learning about healing and herbal cures from other village women, lessons that she may have passed on to Jesus. Because I have been interested in the ways that indigenous peoples and their spirituality manifest in their relationship to the animate earth. This is what we call traditional ecological knowledge or indigenous science. But if you ask the indigenous folks how they know which plants contain medicine, they simply say, the plants told me. The plants are alive. So when I think of Mary as a shepherd, it's very meaningful to me because we too have mothers who may be arbularios or healers, who know the healing power of ampalaya, of guava leaves, alugbati, malunggay, guyabano. Diba? Right? Yes. We may have had mothers and grandmothers who connect with the spirit world as mediators. We still have healers, shamans, and medicine people. In our Filipino languages, they are called Babaylan, Catalonan, Mumbaki, Belian, Maaram, Arbulario. The fact that these gifts may have been lost to many of us in this modern age doesn't negate the fact that this knowledge may still be in our cultural DNA, waiting to be awakened. Perhaps if we ask Mary, if we ask our beloved ancestral mothers, we will begin to awaken the memories of our wholeness as indigenous peoples before we were called Filipinos, before we were Methodists. But I bring this up as a way of talking about different ways of being in the world. Just like Mary, the mother of Jesus, her story invites us to think about the holiness of mothers. A Methodist pastor, Jason Biasi from North Carolina, said, for Protestants to ask Mary for her prayers may be the key to future ecumenism. So what I get from these sources is the call to reconsider the importance of Mary in Protestant churches as a call to build ecumenical spirit, to encourage interfaith dialogue, and to create bridges across differences, or simply to reclaim the power of God, to reclaim the power to birth God in the ordinariness of our lives. I invite us to honor our Filipina mothers who have always been powerful, not in a domineering or better than thou way, but powerful because they offer their lives in service to their families and communities in the same way that Mary offered her life to serve God's purpose. I invoke the holiness of mothers as the power to create bridges. For example, the bridge between US-born kids and their immigrant parents. As a university professor, I have taught many Filipino Americans who tell me of their conflicted relationships with their parents. They talk about their confusion in their sense of identities as Filipino Americans. They question why their parents have not been helpful in clarifying what it means to be Filipino. They talk about miscommunication or the difficulty of bridging the generation and the cultural gap between their immigrant parents and themselves. But I have also seen the healing of this gap when the children and the parents are encouraged to fully embody their Filipino indigenous spirituality alongside the devotional faith as Catholics or as non-Catholics or as Methodists. really is not an either or. We can do both. I invoke the holiness of mothers as the power to create bridges between our neighbors of different faiths. I don't know about you, but there is a part of me that feels envious when my Filipino Catholic friends have their various religious festivals to go to. The Santo Niño in January, the Santa Cruzan in May, the Simbang Gabi in December, the 9-day novenas when somebody dies. I guess that's why I wanted to talk about Mary today, because I am wondering how we might create bridges of communion with our Filipino Catholic kapwa. I invoke the holiness of mothers as the power to create bridges in our places of work, where we work with people who are different than us. There are many areas of conflicts in our workplaces that might push us to the margins, push us to become silent, push us to become subservient. I think if we recognize our holiness, we will also have the courage to break the rules, to speak up, to fight against racial injustice, to call out micro-racial aggressions, and to stand up for other co-workers who get discriminated against. So mothers, please take up your holiness and let it give you courage. I invoke the holiness of mothers as the bridge to create communication within our communities that does not tear down but build up one another. Let's have enough of kanya-kanya mentality or colonial mentality. Let us learn how to work together with people we may not like. Learn to have deep conversations. Learn how to use our pakikiramdam to listen to each other in a deep way that connects our kapwa and loob. We live in a culture that fosters disconnection and separation, because the more disconnected we are, the more fearful we become. And the more fearful we are, the more they can sell us goods, mindless TV shows, and junk food. So dear mothers, please invoke your holiness to create better alternatives for our descendants. The essence of our pagka-Pilipino is pakikipagkapwa, kagandahang loob, at pakikiramdam. No English words can fully capture the meaning of these concepts. So to capture the meaning, we look to our mothers, our Filipino mothers who manifest these values. I think about Filipino mothers who are nurses, caregivers, nannies, managers, entrepreneurs, stay-at-home moms, social workers, counselors, teachers, because I am in awe of mothers whose hearts are open and that they can behold so much compassion with compassion. Just like when Mary had to behold her son on the cross, taking in his suffering into her own heart and body. When I think of the holiness of Filipino mothers, I think of the desperate choices that some mothers have to make, or sometimes forced to make. The choice to leave our own children to take care of other people's children in other countries. The choice to leave the homeland to seek opportunities elsewhere. The choice to leave abusive partners, and sometimes even the choice to stay and bear suffering in silence. Yes, I call this work of making such choices holy work, because we trust and have faith that God would not deem our choices as mistakes or sins. Moral and ethical choices that are often imposed on us by circumstances beyond our control are difficult and heart-wrenching. Sometimes these codes are a way to maintain the superiority of men over women, or the notion of what is developed or modern versus what is traditional. I think in another sermon I would want to talk about how American Christianity has been wedded to capitalist values and how it has been in collusion with the degradation of the earth and of women and children. It breeds separation and disconnection. When I think of the holiness of mothers, I think of the comfort women who were taken by the Japanese as sex slaves during World War II. How many of you have heard of comfort women? Not very many. I think of them because this is still happening, and this is still perpetrated by human traffickers today in many different forms. One of my friends, Evelina Galang, will soon be publishing the stories of these comfort women, the surviving comfort women. As I was reading her book, I was given an early copy. I often broke down and cried at reading the horrible acts that dishonored their bodies and their spirit. In the reading of their stories, I had to allow their stories to get into my body. This is how I know that stories are alive and powerful. I want to honor these Lolas and what they have endured, and we must read their stories and tell others about it. The Lolas said that if we allow their stories to enter our bodies, perhaps wars will end. And finally, when I think of the holiness of mothers, I think of the stories that we will pass on. And I think of the answers to the question, what kind of ancestor are you going to be? Dear mothers, this is a question, a good question to always carry in our hearts. When I think of the holiness of mothers, I do not think of the hallmark version of Mother's Day. I think of the holiness of mothers as the ground of my faith, the rock of my foundation. I pray that we may look to Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary, the embodiment of God's grace, Mary, the mother of all saints, Mary, the shepherd, Mary, the herbalist and healer. All our mothers are holy. As you celebrate your mother today, may you be filled with love, with gratitude, with kindness. May you be filled with the sweetness of remembering all of her holy acts that carry you each day and always, like a lullaby that soothes our aches and pains and our longings to be cradled in the bosom of a holy mother. Sa ukay ng duyan. Maraming salamat.